This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Remember the glory days when everyone was heralding crypto as an uncorrelated asset? It was so nice to have a part of my portfolio that didn't have me sweating over earnings calls. So when Morgan Stanley, Forbes, and the New York Times are all singing the praises of one true portfolio de-risker, I pay attention. I'm talking about fine art. The Times wrote, when stock markets take a nosedive, people look to invest in art. The art market is bulletproof. And Morgan Stanley said, investment-grade art has a low correlation to other major asset classes. That's why Masterworks is seeing more demand than ever, because they're enabling investors of all types to quickly and easily get art into their portfolios, thanks to the approach they pioneered, where paintings are securitized with the SEC and broken into shares. Like I said, demand for Masterworks has spiked. It's up 230% for the year, and now there is a waitlist. But if you go to masterworks.com and use the promo code CryptoConversation, you can skip the waitlist and start investing in just a few clicks. That's masterworks.com, promo code CryptoConversation. You can see important Regulation A disclosures at masterworks.com/CT. That's masterworks.com, promo code CryptoConversation to skip the Masterworks waitlist. And now it's on with the show. My guest today is Will Peck. Will is the head of digital assets at WisdomTree. And if you don't know what WisdomTree is, well, WisdomTree is a traditional asset manager. They're pretty big with crypto exchange traded products. And I think they have a pending filing in the US. I'm sure we'll learn all about this. And yeah, some exciting developments on the way. Welcome to the show, Will.
Great to be here with you, Andy.
All right, well, let's start, Will, with some background from yourself. That's what we usually do at the beginning of the show. I'll just get you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, what you've been doing, I guess in the lead up to your time at WisdomTree, and then we'll start to learn more about WisdomTree and how that relates to the wonderful world of crypto.
Yeah, absolutely. So a bit about me, I'm calling in from the New York area, based in New York City area broadly, you could say. I've been with WisdomTree now for 8 years. Presently I'm head of digital assets, so kind of looking after all of our digital assets efforts. And for us, that's bringing crypto to mainstream investors, but also bringing kind of mainstream assets into the digital ecosystem, which is something we should talk more about. So I've been in this role for about 18 months when you could say a couple other employees and I left our day jobs and dedicated ourselves to digital assets, crypto, blockchain full time. So I'd been with WisdomTree for about 6.5 years prior to that. September will be my 8th year anniversary, which blows some people's mind in crypto. And prior to that, I worked in investment banking, covering financial institutions at Bank of America, which is actually pretty interesting because I remember I had a friend at the time who was very early into, I guess, relatively early into Bitcoin, you could say, who had one of those businesses where he was doing essentially an arbitrage between like US mainland exchanges and then with Japan and Mt. Gox, which I think at the time required having somebody local in Japan to kind of effectuate the transaction. So I learned a little bit about it through them. At the time at B of A, people were kind of curious about it. And there was some thought to, maybe we should cover these companies that are starting to do some stuff here, but it takes 8 years, beyond before some of the big banks could even get comfortable covering these types of companies. So American, and been in the Northeast, originally from California, and that's it's kind of my background.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. And I think it'd be good also if you could just give us a little bit of background on WisdomTree as well. People will have heard the name, but they might be less familiar with exactly the kind of breadth of what WisdomTree is and the history behind it as well. So, yeah, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've got a pretty unique and interesting backstory as a company. But today, where we are, so we're well known, we're the world's largest independent ETF sponsor. We manage approximately $75 billion in assets under management today, all within the exchange-traded fund and exchange-traded product structures. So if people are familiar, these were, taking much of the share from mutual funds for sort of this registered investment product space for retail and institutional people looking to, invest in kind of managed assets. Today there's trillions and trillions of dollars in ETFs and ETPs globally. So $75 billion today, diversified across asset classes, so equities, fixed income, commodities, and now crypto as well. Roughly 60% of our business is here in the United States, where New York is our global headquarters, and the other 40% of the business is in Europe, out of our London kind of local headquarters in Europe. We're a publicly traded company, and the firm actually has a very unique backstory in that we're still founder led. Our CEO and founder is a guy named John Steinberg. He actually originally WisdomTree was a financial media company that published a magazine called Individual Investor. Jono had this media company, and he did a story on ETFs. It was at the time on what's a well-known ETF today, QQQ. That is the NASDAQ 100 ETF. And he did the story on it, and he's like, wow, this is actually an amazing product. It's a better technology than the mutual fund wrapper that existed today. And so he actually reoriented his business and transitioned from a financial media company into an ETF sponsor and index developer back in 2003 and 2004. But that kind of ethos that there are technological improvements in financial services and that structure matters is something that's kind of been baked into our DNA, which is part of the genesis that led us to digital assets broadly.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, talk then about this increasing focus on digital assets at WisdomTree. Love to understand, I suppose, the kind of the broader thinking on behalf of yourself and the other asset managers and strategists at WisdomTree. Obviously you can see that there's a bright future at digital assets, but I'm sure that wasn't always the case, and I'm sure there are differing perspectives as well. But what does that kind of trajectory look like, in terms of what you see in the future? And I'd love to get a sense of, what just a rough percentage of, what digital assets looks like at the moment compared to all the other asset classes that you guys work across, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I use the term digital assets broadly and mostly intentionally. For us, that covers both crypto, could cover kind of things that aren't necessarily crypto like Bitcoin or ETH that people could think about, but still make use of the technology. So we look at all of that within our group. So kind of the backstory really for me and for the firm broadly in digital assets and crypto. So our European operations, was built in large part through an acquisition that we made back in 2017 for what was at the time one of the world's largest gold ETF sponsors in the world, the largest in Europe. So still today we manage, around thereabouts $15 billion of like physical gold bars that you can like see in a vault, and you can like move them from one thing to another. And I remember at the time as we were looking at this deal, some people were starting to think, like, what's this? Like, I've heard about Bitcoin. Like, is Bitcoin, people are calling it digital gold. Is it going to replace gold? How should we think about it? And so that really led us to start doing some work, meeting with some different people in the space who were already looking at it. One of the initial things that we learned was that, like gold, exchange traded products can actually make this asset more accessible for a lot more people who could be interested. So I'm sure you've heard in plenty of other conversations, but there's plenty of people who aren't comfortable either opening up a wallet or for their institution, and they need to kind of work within the existing brokerage rails, for example. In ETPs, particularly well-structured ETPs and ETFs, I use the term ETPs really broadly, can make that much more accessible to people. Whereas, they might not just be able to execute that transaction before. And, an ETF that's backed by crypto can actually provide very, very close exposure to kind of the price of the underlying asset. It'll be physically backed, so it's not relying on any sort of like loans or counterparties or synthetic exposures. And if it's well structured, it should track exactly in line with the price. It's actually a lot like a gold ETF. Whereas instead of there being physical bars of gold in a vault at like, the base of some like major city, right? There's, private keys stored in cold storage, and but the effectual the thing is essentially the same in a lot of regards, at least as far as the ETF and ETP mechanics are concerned. Um, so I say this story because, people have been talking about an ETF in the US here for quite some time. I think the Winklevoss twins filed theirs initially, many, many years ago. We still don't have one approved. In the European market, there is much greater approvals on the from the regulators and the exchanges in terms of listing these products. So we launched one of the first Bitcoin, physically backed Bitcoin ETPs in the European market on the Swiss Stock Exchange. I believe the year was 2019 when it was launched. And that was a kind of very many months, a year journey to kind of understand this better and get our heads around it, ultimately leading to us launching this product. And that was just kind of opened up kind of a whole new worldview for many of us in terms of understanding this technology, what exactly Bitcoin is, how blockchain technology can apply to many other things. About the same time, our CEO, Jana, who I mentioned, and this goes back to kind of the founding of the firm, he asked me at the time when I led strategy, the question of what can do to ETFs, what ETFs did to mutual funds. With really the idea is there a better technology out there for kind of accessing wrapped exposures, for moving money around for capital markets more broadly? We did our research and we're trying to understand stuff at the time, and then came back to it and said, not sure exactly how, but there's something to kind of the blockchain native, the crypto rails that can deliver better financial services, which has led us to embark on what is now our kind of tokenization and wallet initiative, which is called WisdomTree Prime. If anyone's looking, it's kind of the logo right behind me. And we've built up a team to be able to work across both of these initiatives. So today we're roughly 25 people. We've got a lot of support within the firm. And really what we like to say is, as an ETF sponsor, we've got 250 people globally, and what every one of their day jobs does is applicable to digital assets and vice versa.
Yeah, very nice. Well, all right, we'll come back to this WisdomTree Prime, which I know is your, it's I think a blockchain native app, and I know you mentioned that, so I know that's coming up on the roadmap for you guys. So we'll get to that. I just want to, talking about the lack of a physical Bitcoin backed ETF in the US, or a spot based ETF, which as you said, was the Winklevoss twins. How many years ago was their application? There have been so many different applications since then, all of them of course rejected by the SEC in the US. And there's a lot of growing frustration as we see other spot-based physical Bitcoin ETFs be approved all around the world, whereas the US is holding out. I'd love to just get your perspective on why that is, Will, and kind of what the thinking is from yourself and WisdomTree on when that is likely to change.
Yeah, so we do have a Bitcoin filing. We've actually got an Ether filing too, within kind of the SEC, structures, and so those are up for evaluation and approval with the SEC, really through an exchange listing process where these don't fall into generic listing standards. So an exchange, in our case CBOE, would need to get these approved on our behalf. So the SEC, historically has been pretty clear about their objections to these products, really centered around two things. The first being the potential for market manipulation in the underlying Bitcoin spot market, and the second being kind of a lack of custody offerings, or some questions about custody. I think the second one has been addressed in a lot of ways, not always, by kind of the growing, frankly, roster of highly regulated custodians in the United States that potentially meet the qualified custodian standard as the SEC defines it. Notably, there are a few banks, federally chartered banks, that have crypto custody offerings. We are actually working with one of them. US Bank is named in our filing. It's not a US bank, it's actually US Bank, which is maybe something many people aren't familiar with. But that's one where I think we hope is kind of been properly addressed. I think the challenging one that the industry's kind of been trying to navigate has been the SEC's qualms, I guess you could say, with the potential for market manipulation, and the lack of surveillance sharing agreement between like a market of sufficient size, I think the term, or I might be messing up a little bit of the terminology in there. And I think that's one that hopefully there are a couple different ways you can try and address it. You can try and point to other examples. You can definitely point to the futures market on CME. That is a cash settled futures, which is the reference price for that is calculated by CF benchmarks based on underlying spot Bitcoin exchanges, which I think some people have kind of struggled to get their heads around. And that's actually, that point has led, I think, to what has now been that point combined with another, which is that the SEC has actually approved a Bitcoin futures ETF. There's one BITO that was the first one to get approved, and I think there are issues with futures, and this gets into a little bit of kind of financial nitty gritty. But for anyone who's traded commodity futures in the past, have heard of things called like contango and backwardation, which is essentially the roll cost of what it costs to go from holding one futures contract to the next, right? So ultimately, if you hold a futures contract to maturity or expiration or whatever, you need to take delivery of that. If people remember, during kind of the peak of COVID, there was that crazy moment where oil prices went negative because it just kind of got passed around at the end, and people didn't want to actually take delivery of the oil, and not everyone set up to take delivery, right? So there are plenty of punters and people who participate in oil futures markets with like no actual ability to take on a barrel of oil and like put it in their front yard, right? So that leads to some of what you typically see is contango, where there's a cost to go from one month to the next, and if you're rolling from one to the other, there will be a performance drag within that. When the Bitcoin futures ETF came out, there's actually the contango was a pretty steep curve. I think it's moderated a bit today, but I haven't looked at the numbers, which would say that just on a totally apples to apples basis, if you hold a Bitcoin futures ETF versus a kind of spot Bitcoin, you could expect a double digit plus performance drag on the asset. Now you could quantify that, you could understand it, and it certainly had kind of tighter pricing than what you'd seen from some of the OTC traded trusts in the United States that have much wilder deviations in pricing. But nonetheless, there is that performance drag with a futures-based ETF. So, and I know this is a long answer, but the approval of the Bitcoin futures ETF and kind of the rejection of a similar spot ETF, which people have argued is based on an similar underlying market, as I think what's led to, and they need to speak for themselves on this, to Grayscale's lawsuit of the SEC, saying that, under what I think is called the Administrative Procedures Act or something like that, that there's kind of differential treatment between how the SEC is treating these two assets. And there's something, fundamentally, I don't know if illegal is the right term, but not appropriate in that. And they've sued the SEC looking for, a judge to provide relief there and grant GBTC, Grayscale's Bitcoin Trust, the right to convert to an ETF. So that was a very long answer to what was a simple question of why does the SEC not approve them? And I think it's those two reasons. And I don't have a crystal ball. I guess we'll see with Grayscale's lawsuit. We certainly intend to be first or among the first in getting approval. And we certainly think we've got a very compelling filing, but we just need to work with the SEC on it. We're not planning to join the lawsuit. I'll put it that way. We have lots of things that we have in front of the SEC, and we think we'll ultimately be able to work through it. But I don't have a crystal ball on when that might be.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you for those thoughts, Will. And yeah, I mean, it seems like Mr. Gary Gensler at the SEC is more doubling down, if anything, and saying that the spot-based ETF seems to be some time away. But interesting, in the meantime, I see the Wall Street Journal has published a number of editorials just over the last few weeks, putting a bit of pressure on Mr. Gensler as well, and making the case that he's not being entirely fair. And conspiracies suggest, I see on Twitter a number of people talking that, Mr. Gensler has higher political aspirations, and that's one reason for his delay. But that is pure conspiracy, and we don't really like to deal with conspiracies here, so we won't get into that. Well, let's move on instead to, the mobile app, I think it is, that you mentioned, the WisdomTree Prime. Am I right in thinking perhaps that this is aimed at a slightly different target market for you?
Yeah,
guys?
absolutely. it's definitely an evolution in terms of who we're serving. So our clients today typically are US-based financial advisors in the United States, some institutions, and then in Europe, it's more of a, institutions, multi-asset managers, family offices. That's really where a lot of the wealth management is done. And, we have salespeople, and kind of our marketing is targeted in that B2B way to help them understand the value that our funds can provide and why they should, choose ours versus a competitor's, for example. So WisdomTree Prime is actually our kind of first direct to consumer kind of retail initiative where we'll be going. It'll be a mobile app that consumers will sign up. So it's definitely a bit different in that way, but the underlying product itself is kind of in terms of creating transparent wrapped exposures, providing access to things like gold, stocks, bonds, whatever it could be. We think is pretty similar and leverages a lot of the same skill sets we have. And this goes back to, I use that anecdote of, went through this process of launching the Bitcoin ETF, discovered what this technology can provide more broadly with that angle of there are actually ways to kind of improve upon what the rails are today. A lot of people point to, it's pretty remarkable in crypto markets that they trade 24/7, 365, right? You have instant atomic settlement in some cases where you're not needing to rely on a counterparty or do some sort of like delivery versus payment like settlement mechanism. There are a lot of very interesting things that happen in terms of like native financial services. Not to say that crypto isn't like clunky sometimes, and there's definitely some things that need to be figured out, but we think there's really great potential in terms of improving how users engage with financial services through this technology. So what's unique about WisdomTree Prime, it's a digital wallet. There are lots of digital wallets out there that allow you to hold digital assets, but really for us, it's that digital assets covers both, crypto like Bitcoin and ETH, but also these tokenized versions of mainstream assets like gold, which is not something that we've seen kind of done holistically in that same way, that they can sit all in one user experience and provide real seamless interoperability between these two assets in terms of how you manage your portfolio and your day-to-day financial life, right? I think another one of these things that I've found to be very interesting about crypto is, people think about Bitcoin, it's a store of value, it's an investment, it's a payment mechanism, right? All in one. And that's really what this technology allows you to do. Whereas previously in the past, your investing tech stack and your banking tech stack were on totally different things. And today it's all in one with crypto and blockchain. So that's certainly a thing that we've seen. And we think this offering and kind of the tokenized exposures that we're putting in it will allow us to participate in that trend over time.
Yeah, fascinating. And well, just to be clear then, Will, so are you saying that WisdomTree Prime will be or is a full blockchain-based crypto wallet? And so if it's like a Bitcoin or Ethereum, the user can actually send and receive Bitcoin and Ethereum in the way that they could with any decentralized crypto wallet, but also you can hold, you're talking about tokenized versions of other assets, for example, gold, and maybe, I don't know what other assets there are as well, stable coins, etc. as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Some of it will be kind of continued features that we add over time, but the key point being blockchain native, right? We didn't want to kind of have this being like an old rail way to, a lot of people pointed this out before, a lot of neobanks, neobrokers are really just fancy front ends on kind of the legacy old rails. And we wanted this to truly be blockchain native. And we think one of the first use cases, especially from the traditional angle of building core financial services around that concept. Exactly right, Andy. It should allow you to hold all of these things at once. One thing I would say is it will be custodial. So it is, WisdomTree is a custodian. Users won't have their own private keys as part of that. We can talk about some of the pros and cons of that, and we think why we made that decision in terms of what we're offering. And it will also be curated in the sense that we're not looking to kind of provide another app that like you can buy, this dog coin and this dog coin and this dog coin. Like it's trying to be a little bit more curated in what we're providing in there. So less of a trading app and more of a savings and investing experience is what we're aspiring for.
Oh, well, that sounds like a really sensible approach to me, Will. Talk us through who the kind of ideal user or customer is for this then, and where are they based in the world? Like who is this available to?
Yeah, we're starting in the US and our waitlist is open. It's live in the US, so people can sign up at wisdomtreeprime.com and be on the wait list to be one of our first beta testers. We're doing our initial phases of beta testing right now. So the initial, the target market in the US is kind of what we call tech savvy, self-directed investors, people who are crypto curious, digital assets curious, but not necessarily natives today. So if somebody's got, their own Ledger and MetaMask wallets and things like that, and they're kind of convinced of wanting to do everything, self-custody and self-sovereign in that sense, we'd love to be able to serve you and have products to serve you over time. But this is truly a custodial wallet. And so I think it's really driving towards that next, hundreds of millions of users is who we want to be able to serve and bring people into what we think is kind of truly the future of financial services with digitally native, blockchain native financial services.
Brilliant. All right. Well, as we start to finish off this part of the podcast, Will, look, I'll just give you the opportunity. Anything else you want to share in terms of, what you guys are working on at WisdomTree and the digital assets area? And look, if people are listening and they're intrigued by the idea of potentially getting on the waitlist for what you guys are building, tell the people what they should do and where they should go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we covered a lot of stuff, and I appreciate getting to speak with you today, Andy. You can go to WisdomTreePrime.com to learn more. Just Google WisdomTree Prime or WisdomTree, and we'll have more information for you there. It's very easy to sign up once you do. We have a blog where me and other colleagues are kind of publishing, some of thoughts around it, what we're trying to build, etc. And you can follow me on Twitter at WB Peck, and that's really it, I'd say.
All right. Well, let's go to a very quick break, and then if you'll indulge me, we'll come back and we'll have some fun. We'll run you through the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round. Back in 1 second.
Here's what's being said about Masterworks.
My name is Jacob N. I'm from Long Island, and I've invested over $73,000 with Masterworks. My portfolio performance just wasn't cutting it. I researched all these alternative investments, like crypto and NFTs, but they didn't make sense to me. Then I read about Masterworks in Forbes, and I signed up right away. And now you can too. Thanks, Masterworks.
Get VIP access at masterworks.io and use promo code JACOB. See important disclosures at masterworks.io/DC.
Boom, and we are back, and I'm with Will Peck. Will is the head of digital assets at WisdomTree. Look, Will, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go, Will. Just going to run some questions at you. Just want you to give me kind of quick, snappy, hot take style answers. Just a bit of fun. Question 1, where would you say, Will, that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I'm more on the multi-chain opportunist. I think there's certainly, frankly, a lot of kind of garbage out there you need to sift through, but I believe in a multi-chain future, and I think Bitcoin is amazing and definitely serves a role, but I think there's lots, you only have to look at Ethereum to see all the, applications that this technology can provide. So I'd probably sit more to the latter on that scale.
Absolutely. Makes sense to me, Will. What would you say, though, is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
My firmest conviction crypto opinion is that the Bitcoin access products today in the United States have been causing part of the issue that we're seeing in the market today. Things like, the Grayscale Trust, things like that have, I think they're great people over there, but that the deviation, you can even look at why the SEC has not approved it. But as an ETF guy, seeing prices where, it was trading at a huge premium to net asset value and then dropped down to a huge discount to net asset value just kind of like bothers me. And I can see why that's been causing issues in kind of the crypto financial markets.
Yep, makes sense also. All right, well, Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So with that in mind, look, anything you like here, kind of a Bitcoin blockchain, Web3, or even, the crypto ETF, ETP situation, what does it all look like in 10 years' time?
That is a great question. I mean, we're expecting to be kind of one of the leaders in terms of bringing kind of traditional mainstream assets onto the chain as well, kind of building off what we think, frankly, Tether and Circle and others have done in terms of building, stable coins, which is really a first example of this. So I think in 10 years, you're certainly going to see much greater adoption of blockchain native financial services. And this should feel less like kind of a thing that's kind of only available to the people who are willing to kind of put in the time and really understand it, in terms of something that's much more broadly accessible and improving lives around the world.
Very nice. All right. Well, the flip side of this, of course, is a quote by William Gibson, who said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. With that in mind, Will, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
Well, I mean, if we're talking most people, I mean, most of the world, right, is incredibly kind of behind. We're talking about how many crypto wallets a day in a world of 8 billion people. I mean, that is a massive market. And it is really remarkable when you think, one of the things we like to say in ETFs was it was a huge advantage when all you needed to access them was a brokerage account, versus how mutual funds in the past, all you need to access these assets today is a smartphone. And that's going to have really profound implications. And the smartphones are already here. We just got to get more and more people kind of using them in this way.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's close this out. Well, the final question is, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, TV show, or universe?
I really enjoyed Andy Weir's The Martian when I first read it, kind of before the movie came out. I had a great experience reading it at my in-laws over a holiday, where I ducked away in the room and just kind of read it a lot. So that's one that comes to mind. I think that's a pretty cool one, and maybe not a universe, but one I quite enjoyed.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Hey, we reached the end of the show. That was fun. Will, again, look, please just shout out your Twitter again, and of course, how people can get on that wait list at WisdomTree.
Twitter's at WB Peck. You can follow me there, and WisdomTreePrime.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Will. All the best, and bye for now.
Great. Thank you, Andy.
All right, there you go. That was Will from WisdomTree chatting ETPs, ETFs, all that good stuff. Always a good time, always fun. We reached the end of the show. I think that's it for today, folks. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Crypto Conversation in whatever podcast app you are using. Give us a nice rating. I think Spotify have enabled podcast ratings now. So, yeah, if you're listening on Spotify, give us a review. Hit the subscribe button. Love your work. Thanks, team. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Kind. See ya.